Hi, everybody, and welcome to episode 2 of Get Stacked. And today we're talking all things data. I don't know about you, but when I first started in the recruitment industry, literally no one spoke about data. The thought of cleaning data was not a thing, and our lovely consultants would spend hours and hours adding very poor quality candidates and contacts and leads to the system. But that is now, thankfully, a thing of the past, I hope, Tracey. And we have all seen the light, and we've realised that having high quality and hopefully clean data is the way forward in recruitment processing, and especially when it comes to things like data. So whilst we're waiting for everybody to join, I will give you a quick introduction to myself, and then I'll let our guest for today introduce herself. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Holly Langley. I'm the founder of Restack. I set up the business around 2 years ago to help customers, and very specifically Bullhorn customers, with their data, with automation, with the analytics side of stuff, and to really help them maximize and use the entire Bullhorn ecosystem and the Bullhorn marketplace. We work with clients across the UK and the US as well. So any Bullhorn related questions, then we are your go-to people. This video is on our YouTube channel. Please stay up to date and subscribe to our channel so you're up to date with all of our latest videos that we put out for free on a regular basis, with lots of tips and tricks on all things Bullhorn. That's enough about me. Tracey, over to you. Tell us a bit about yourself.
Thanks so much, Holly, and hello everybody who are joining us online. So Tracey O'Neill is my name, and I am a data consultant. I'm a career recruiter, so I basically started in recruitment many years ago, and then about 10 years ago, I moved across into the data analytics and insights side of the global recruitment company that I worked for. So that company had over 14 offices, and I was looking at basically data quality for the group. But as Holly said, that was in the days when everything was manual. So we're in that happy position of being able to automate a lot of that data quality work, and then moving forward from that with good quality data, we can do a lot with it. So it's a lot around customer journeys, it's a lot about analytics, it's a lot about management information. So I basically work with companies to look at how the data flows through the organization, and essentially helping them grow by leveraging the data that they have, and really sometimes helping people understand that they're sitting on a data asset, which, back to Holly's point, is sort of a why should we do it, why should we worry about our data. So a lot of people, I think, are getting into that mindset as well, which is great. So
yeah, and we've worked on a few projects together. So Tracey and I both in the Satori Partnership, which is a consulting group offering advice to agencies and also other talent companies or talent departments, outside of the recruitment industry, to help them with data and all things sort of tech and streamlining their recruitment processes. So it's always interesting when our two minds come together, isn't it, Tracey? And I say often our phone calls should be podcasts, because we could talk about this stuff all day long, which is why we're bringing it to you now. So let's go into our very first question. If you're watching this and you do have questions, please do add them into the comments and we will answer those at the end. So out of everything you see, what is some of the biggest challenges businesses face when it comes to data quality, and sort of more specifically data quality in automation?
Yeah, so sometimes it's the really obvious things that people miss. So if we're talking about automations and what you're trying to do is send out communications, for example, to your database, to your candidates, to get them to update their CVs or something like this, one of the big things that people miss is that they may not have a valid email address.
Yeah.
And I see this a lot. So with candidates, it's not so much, because obviously with candidates, we're all the time, they're sending in their CVs and they're keeping their data up to date in a lot of circumstances. But particularly with contacts, client contacts, those emails are bouncing, they're missing, people are putting in a TBC with all good intentions of going back to clean them up. So one of the biggest things is just missing data, totally. So that's the first one. And then I suppose the second sort of big piece is around how current the data is. So obviously we can use automation to help with that. But if you're running automations to try and segment people, or, put people into, certain pools or certain groups, we do need up-to-date data. So, oftentimes I'll go in and I'll see organizations with maybe 20,000 candidates sitting on their database, and a very small percent, I'm going to say 10%, that have been spoken to in the past 12 to 18 months. And everybody on the call is probably sitting thinking, that's not us. Our data is much cleaner than that, and it's much more current. But I would challenge people to, after the call, go and have a look and see how current their data actually is in terms of when it was last updated and when you last received a CV from people. So even understanding the size of the problem is often the problem, in itself.
Yeah, I think someone told me once that the average figure is 3%. Most people are speaking to 3% of their candidates on a yearly basis, which isn't great. Yeah. Especially if you have something like automation, where in theory you could speak to everybody a lot more regularly. And on your first point surrounding the email addresses, I had a good idea for an automation a few weeks ago that we've deployed with some of our clients. And it is, if a candidate has a CV send or above, so a CV send or interview or offer or placement, but the starting point will be the CV send. If their email address is not valid, as in it doesn't contain the @ symbol, then trigger it to go to either operations or the consultant to say, this candidate's now had a submission, you do need to get the right email address in, because we were trying to build more automations, but we realized some of them weren't being delivered. And we thought, well, hang on, how can that be? Because this person's got an interview, so their details should be right on the system. But lo and behold, that part of the process around that data quality wasn't there. And often, if you're adding a lot of candidates from LinkedIn, you don't have their email address. I do get that. So making sure that you're trying to get those details updated at the right time does really, really value.
Sorry, I was going to say, there's two sides of it. One is that it actually hampers your sender reputation. So if you're continually sending to email addresses or trying to, that are bouncing all the time, that impacts your sense, I don't know what the word is, but your sender reputation. But then where you're missing the value going forward is everything's very reactive, everything's very transaction. You're placing the candidate, you're moving on to the next deal. But then in 6 months, 12 months, that candidate may have moved up in the organization. They may be a good contact for you to have in the future, and you're totally missing that opportunity because you don't have an email address for them. So yeah, I think that's definitely really, really important. I am going to say though one thing about the notifications. So again, there's pros and cons to everything, but one mistake or sort of area that I see people having a challenge with is they send their consultants too many notifications. So as a result, consultants are getting notified about everything from within automations, and as a result they just ignore everything. So I don't know, Holly, if you would agree, but be selective with what you're notifying your consultants about, because otherwise it just loses its value.
It's a really interesting topic, and I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments of this video if you're watching. I'm with you. I love a task, because you can go in on automation, you can assign a task to somebody, and it's there until they untick it. Perfect. However, some people don't like there to be too many tasks. But the problem is, if you were to send out 50 notifications, there's no way of tracking what those 50 notifications were, unless you were to also add a note onto the system, but that's not particularly helpful either. At least with the task, you can see it's been added, and then you can see if it's been actioned. So I personally sometimes prefer to use tasks in that way, so that you're not continually emailing people with stuff they don't need and therefore gets reviewed. Tasks should be high value, high impact, like code red, as someone described it the other day. Okay, so with those two things in mind, the importance of email data and the importance of sort of communicating and making sure the data is up to date, what steps should teams or recruitment businesses take to clean and structure their data before setting up some automations?
So again, what I would always think about is start from a strategic level. So again, even sort of if you're at a desk level, right, you need to think about what data do I want and why. So, you know, one mistake that I see people making, you know, we start out in a project to clean our data just because we think it's the right thing to do. And then it's, you know, everybody's hammered with, okay, you have to code 100 candidates or, you know, whatever. And then people just lose interest, right? So obviously we've got automation to help us do all of that coding, but we need to think about what we're using the data for. So if you're a recruiter, the data that you need potentially is, you know, the job title, it could be the current company, it could be the salary. So you need things that are going to help you refine your searches. That's from a recruiter's point of view. If you want to send marketing communications to your candidates or indeed your client contacts, you need to be able to segment them. So that has to be a level above. So you want to then put a job category, let's say, against each of your candidates, or you want to assign which sectors that they've worked in, because you want to not necessarily find the individual, but you want to find a group of individuals. So that's really important. So we need to think about what is the data when we're cleaning the data, what data do we need to clean and why, I think is really important. And it's not necessarily just about coding. So you might have status might be really important. So you might have a automation might help you to say, right, who are the people who have been on a short list in the past month? Let's say we know that there are most active candidates and they're the ones that we want to call straight away, for example. So I think status is important. And then, for example, if you are, let's say you're managing a big account, what data is important for you is that you need to know how many jobs you've had at a client level, how many of those jobs you have filled, how long it has taken to fill those jobs. So that the automation and the data go hand in hand there. Because oftentimes I'll go into companies and I'll say, okay, how long typically does it take you to fill jobs? And what we find is that people don't close jobs. So they open jobs, they work them and they place them, but then jobs aren't closed. So we have no then sense of how long does it take to fill a job? What's your fulfillment rate? So the client is really interested in knowing, okay, these people are potentially going to come on a preferred supplier list with me, and they're tendering for this. How long does it take this particular recruitment agency to fill my jobs? I, as the consultant or the business development person or the account manager, I need to know. So that is data that is in your system that would be really worthwhile keeping clean from an automations perspective and from a process perspective. So I think there's a lot about, I suppose, back to what to clean and why is probably a big thing for me.
Yeah, I agree with you, everything you said there. And the only thing I'd add in is like really look at what's being used. One of the things that I see is so many fields. And I always go on about this example. I go into businesses on a regular basis. I saw one yesterday, and on the company, there was a fax. It says company fax. And then you've got candidate fax. I saw candidate Skype. Skype no longer actually exists as a product. I don't know why it's on there. So if stuff isn't being used, please remove it from your systems and really understand what the team are doing and also where you want to be as a business. Like you may not need to code people right now because you may not want to have AI and auto matching or what have you. But if in 12 months you do, or in 24 months, you need to start that process now to getting it clean. So you always need to have the end in sight and make sure that all of your data strategy is kind of coming back to that so you can really kind of get the results that you need.
Yeah. There's a big, I was just going to say, actually, before we finish on that point, there's a big, obviously one of the hot potatoes is always mandatory fields. Should we make fields mandatory or not? And look, it's always a discussion, but my feeling on it is I would prefer to have less mandatory fields and more good quality data rather than, people putting in a dot to skip a field or, picking the first value from a drop-down list and so on. So that's my 2 pence on it. But it's always a very lively discussion, let's say.
100%. And that's why we do things like this, so we can have these conversations and help people kind of have a different perspective of it. So on that topic, like what are some of the common data mistakes you see organizations making, and how can they be avoided? You go first, and then I'll share what I've seen.
I think from a data structure point of view, it's not thinking about a change that you make and how it could impact either a different team or, you know, something further down the line. So as an example, you might decide to have a data field, and you might have it as a free text field. But what happens then is that doesn't, if you come to have reporting, it doesn't help with reporting, because then I've got fields that have a Y in it for yes, or I have a YES, or I have, so if I come to do it, come to create a report, it becomes difficult for me, and then I have to go back and clean the data and make it all standard. So whilst it might be useful from, you know, a recruiter's point of view to have something that you can type into as a free text, from a reporting standpoint, it makes life difficult. So always just to kind of be thinking about, if I'm making a change from a data structure point of view, how will that impact somebody else? And another one that I see all the time is company sectors. So I might have a company and it has 5 different sectors on a system, and that might be useful for the consultant. But again, when it comes to reporting and I'm trying to say, okay, what sectors are we getting revenue from? A company with 5 different sectors doesn't help me, because it counts everything more than once. So again, just to kind of think about that, about the structure of the data and why you're using it. What else? What was the other one that I had there? Again, asking consultants to think about coding and administration. I mean, obviously what we want people doing is filling jobs and doing business development, but there are a lot of really clever automations that we can use that people don't really think about. So one that Holly and I have been talking about recently is code candidates by intent. So if somebody applies to a financial accountant role, we would assume that their intention is that they want to be spoken to about financial accountant roles. Now, they might be a gardener applying to a financial accountant role, but their intention is that they're interested in financial accountant roles. So there is a little bit of further kind of, you know, weeding out that needs doing from a, you know, a consultancy point of view, which is what we want. We want people doing high value activities, but it's better than having a blank. So even if you said, okay, all these people want to be financial accountants, are they or are they not? But at least you have some guide towards them. So I think that's good as well. So it's just to think about using your automations creatively to help you with your data.
I love that. I love that. So I think for me, there's 2 main mistakes that I see. First of all, it's the skills categories, industries, sub-industries, coding, whatever you want to call it. I go into businesses, and more often than not, I see 5 to 100 to 1,000 skills. And what I'm seeing is they've got front-end developer, front space end developer, front end, FE developer, Python developer, Java developer. All of a sudden, you've got 10 different ways to code up one front end Java developer. I don't know if that's actually even a thing. Apologies if it isn't. You need less is more. I would rather that everybody was given the broad title of front end developer, rather than something really, really niche or spelt incorrectly that then isn't going to give you the segmentation that you need. So it's once you know what you want, it's really easy using automation to recode them, because anybody who has FE, front end, space, whatever you want to call it, you can just do assign those and apply the new skill. But you need to go through that process of mapping that out. So that's, for me, the biggest problem that I see in businesses. They kind of got too much going on. The second thing, and I always find this remarkable, is about the job workflow. So we've got too many jobs open. We've got 1,000 jobs open, but the reality is we know there's actually only 30. So they need closing. But then you look at those jobs and we've got no shortlists, no CVs, 1 interview, 1 placement. And you think, well, hang on, that's not quite right. Or maybe sometimes it is if you're an exec search or you were speccing somebody out. But we really need to make sure that all web responses are saved. People generally do get shortlisted, and people do have the CV and stuff logged. So there's a real part of that. Now, I've got some stats somewhere. If you want me to pull them out, drop me a message on LinkedIn and I'll send them over. But when you shortlist people and get web responses and shortlist and go through that whole process, the fill rate is higher because you've got a track on it. And one of the tasks I do when I go into a customer is I kind of am looking at the jobs that had the whole process followed, the ones that didn't, and then you can compare the fill rates and what actually happened, because when the whole process is followed, it is it's a lot more thorough, let's say. So we've had a quick question from Ali that I'm going to come on to. Thank you, Ali. When do you think tasks or notifications become too much? I try to reserve a notifications for something that is close to the money for a consultant to action, and tasks more for review daily, weekly. I would really agree with you on that. For me, notifications should be this contractor or placement has a start date today. You need to call them today. Like, this is urgent, 8 a.m., something you've got to do today. That is like a high value notification, as well as potentially like a contract is going to get redeployed. Or these, ideally though, like these ones are going to get redeployed, so you're not getting multiple ones out there. That for me is it. And then a task would be much more like, we recommend you check in with this person. We recommend that this needs to happen. So kind of something that really does need action. Where possible, what I've started to do is push people into hot lists more and build more analytics based on that. So we almost are having on automation, we're saying contractor care. So we need to add a note type that's saying contractor care due. And then you could potentially create some analytics within that. I've just bought analytics for our test account. So expect some more tutorials and stuff from me about analytics and all things like that in the coming weeks. But Tracey, what are your thoughts? Notifications, task?
Yeah, I would 100% agree. I mean, I'm all about the data, so I'm in the analytics all the time. So definitely, if you have, excuse me, and I think on dashboards already. On Bullhorn, there's out of the box analytics metrics that are set up that talk about candidates who have been added, who haven't been spoken to, jobs that have been added that have no CV sends. So really, pay attention to those kind of quality metrics that are on your analytics dashboards. I think that's really important.
And I think the final thing from me on the notifications is make sure the team know what to do. So it sounds really obvious, like. I can imagine the people who are watching this are in ops, marketing, and C-level, and we know that we should be calling a contractor to redeployment if that's what the notification says. But we know that because we've set up the automation. So on your notifications, make it really, really clear and say the contractor is due to renew in 6 weeks' time. These are the steps that you need to take. And what I've done in the past is I've worked with the learning and development team to say, look, what's your internal process? What wording do you want me to use in here to make sure we've got that constant sort of communication and the team knows what to do?
Sorry, I'm just going to skip back to something because it occurred to me as you were talking. I don't want to forget to say it. One thing that's really important is when we talk about, you mentioned there about your skills lists, right? And how these big, long and winding skills lists. I had a client and the person within the organization was responsible basically for keeping the list of codes up to date. And they had a really good kind of system where if somebody needed, in the business, needed a new code added, they would come to this one central person and say, can I get this new code added? I am totally in favor of that. I think that's brilliant. However, they were adding all of these codes, and then I said to them, but do they ever search using these codes? Like, do they ever use them? They need that, like you say, front-end developer code. They must have it on the list, but then they don't actually ever use it for searching because, let's be honest, the whole coding piece is a throwback to when we didn't have Boolean searching. So in today's world, everything is Boolean, everything is searched on text. And then we just use codes, location, salaries, statuses to refine your search. So I think just because you were talking there about the long list of skills codes, I think that's important as well.
But interestingly, with the AI, especially the stuff that Bullhorn is building, it's more and more like these coding based. So it's interesting. And hopefully these things don't need to be long projects. You just got to put the time and effort into to get it right. So I'm going to skip a couple of questions that we had planned because I think like there's more value that we can give all of our lovely viewers. So what best practices can teams implement to ensure their data stays clean and organized now and in the long run?
So I think one thing that is useful is to, particularly if you're sending outbound communications, outbound automation, seed the database. And what I mean by that is put your own email address in the database as a candidate or a contact, so that you can see what quality of comms are going out, because you'll be receiving them. So that's always a really good one, just to kind of start to kind of keeping an eye on the quality and making sure that the segmentation is correct. In terms of making sure that your data stays clean and organized, have baseline metrics. So again, as an example, and I'll use the outbound automation as an example. If every week you send to 5,000 people on a newsletter, and then for some reason you see 12,000 have gone out that week, something has gone wrong. So you just always need to keep a baseline of metrics in your mind as to what good looks like, because you can very quickly spot if something looks like it's off. So I think that's important in terms of a best practice. What else do I need to say to you? Let me think. Other best practices, Holly.
My thought process is just reviewing it regularly. Like you need to be regularly reviewing the quality of what's going into your system. So if you're adding 100 candidates a month or 100,000 candidates a month, you need to make sure that they're all having the right stuff. So actually go in and do a quarterly check. How many candidates have been added that we've spoken to? How many have added without a phone, without email? How many candidates are still on the system that have never been spoken to? How many shouldn't be on here for GDPR? So having that regular reviewing internally, again, of key metrics or things that you should be looking out for to make sure that your data is where it needs to be, you're compliant with various laws and stuff, and just keeps it going, because it's all well and good doing this now. If you go in and spend 6 solid weeks recategorizing everybody, don't touch it for another 6 years, we'll be backward to where we were. So having that regular commitment, and I think just tracking stuff. Like, I go into a lot of businesses, they're not really sure what their field mappings are, they're not sure what's being tracked, they're not looking after their automations as well as they could be. So tracking stuff, doing stuff, and just keeping an eye on that, and really making sure you've got the time, you can dedicate the time and resource in your business to do it.
One thing that is really important as well, again, it's all about looking at downstream impact and how one thing impacts something else. So again, if you have automations built on a status of active, and then all of a sudden somebody over in your Bullhorn field mapping changes it from active to hot, or let's use an example, all your automations over here are going to break. So it's just really keeping that view of that, kind of how the data flows through the organization as well. I think that's really important. Having at least one person who looks at all of your different data repositories, let's say, and making sure that everything matches, I think is really important.
Yeah. So our final kind of topic we're going to look at, and if you have any comments, please let us know in the comment box below. We'd love to go through some of your questions. So I'm going to run through a couple of my favorite automations to maintain and clean data, and I'll come on to a couple of yours. For me, new applications. If you've got applications coming through from your website and you've just got their CV and their first name in their email, that's not great. We need more. So I love personally like a pre-screen candidate engagement questionnaire. 3 or 4 questions. What industries are you in? What's your current job title? What salary would you like? And you could also do that with people who you need to re-engage with. So really kind of driving that engagement. If they are right, whether you think they could be good, you could then use them to send out further automations and add value. So really kind of clean up the data when it comes into the system. I love a status, contract, placement statuses, candidate statuses, contact statuses, anything that you can do to make sure you know in your system who's active, who's not looking, who's a passive candidate, who's on site with one of your clients. It really, really helps. And I think the final data cleansing one is the archiving piece. If people shouldn't be on your system, archive them. But prior to archiving them or removing them, please try one more time to get their CV. We've been doing this with a client, sent out 500 emails, asking them to say, look, we're going to have to remove you, but update your CV. And if you're interested, we've got about 10% came back with CVs, which is amazing, because that's 10% of people, who 50 more candidates that we've already paid for, didn't cost anything. We've already got a relationship with them from 3 years ago. We've re-engaged them. So that's a great way of cleaning the data. Any other ones that you'd like to add, Tracey?
Yeah, I'm going to finish where we started. The email contains @ is the most important one, because you'll do a search and you will say, has email, yes or no, but that's going to take in all of those ones that says, TBC and dot and no email, and this is a duplicate.
Do not contact.
Do not contact. So if you have email contains the @ sign, or does not contain the @ sign, I think that's really important.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a great one. And yeah, you might not want to do it for all candidates, but anybody that you're, like as we said earlier, at submission or have been added or shortlisted, definitely worth doing. Does anybody have any other questions or comments in? If so, put them in the chat. If we miss any, we will come back and go through those with you later on. We love putting out free content. This time next week, I'm meeting James Veal, who's currently at Meet Recruitment, and we're going to be talking about something different. We're going to be talking about like the measuring of the ROI and your automations to make sure that everything is where they should be, and that your automations are doing what they should be doing, and they're not just getting forgotten about. And James, I've known James for a while now, and he's got lots of innovative ideas about how we can really push those to the next level to get what we need out of it. If you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe to this YouTube channel. It's probably the only thing I will ever ask you to do. We don't collect all your data on the attendee list. It really helps us populate more and more content if we get stuff coming through. We've got one question. This is our final question of the day, but we'll come back through at a later point and go through everything. So Ryan, thank you very much. How do you go about getting the buy-in from the management team to drive behavior change around data? Oh, that's a cracking question. Tracey, do you want to start?
We need a whole session on culture and driving data culture change. I think getting the buy-in from the management is show them where the money is. So pretty much every recruitment business that I work with can tell me how much money Joe makes or how much money the finance desk makes. Where it starts to get management's attention is where you can say what sectors your money is coming from, and where your growth areas are, and where you have lapsed clients and where you have white space. That's what gets management's attention. So if you can start doing some analytics and say, right, we have up to this point, recently a client that I worked with realized that they had 80% of their revenue was coming from FMCG. That was good for 2 reasons. Number one, they could go and target other FMCG clients, but number two, they realized that there was a risk element in it. So if all of your revenue is coming from 80% is coming from one particular sector, you might want to think about diversifying. So to get management buy-in, you need to talk to them about the money. So data quality is important, as I say, for searching, for marketing, for management information, and for business development. So that's what I would, that's my thing. But if we ever want to do a session on driving data culture, Holly, I'm definitely there.
Okay, we'll talk about that one. I think for me, it's kind of a couple of things. Go slowly, like we can't make all of these changes overnight. So work out what's going to get you the most ROI or the biggest change to help that, and kind of do it slowly and educate them slowly. I think the second thing is try and get some quick wins. Like going back to the example about getting the candidates to update their CV before we archive them, that's 50 candidates. That's actually, in the grand scheme of stuff, a really small amount. But we can now go in and say, we've just got you 50 new candidates, and they've done this, and we've done this, and now 2 of them at CV, 2 of them at interview. So that's a really small thing that we have done through one automation that's kind of driving change within the business. And now we are being really enthusiastic about it. We're sharing it with the management. We're sharing it with the leadership team so they can see the value of the possibilities that are there. And we're just taking it one step at the time. And I think the open line of communication, the more that you can do to drive that and help educate them and bring them onto events like this and other in-person events that I think are really useful, just for them to see the options that are out there. And I think be really honest and say that everyone at the moment is talking about AI. It's only as good as what you put into it. So actually kind of saying, if you want to have a streamlined ops function, marketing first, automation first, bullhorn first, in 3 to 5 years' time, we do need to be doing this now, because we can't get here if you haven't started that process yet. So really small wins to get you there.
The one thing before I forget, one thing that always gets leadership and management attention is showing them the value of their data asset and explaining to them, if they ever want investment from an outside investor, they need to be able to show the quality of their database and that it is, you know, current and up to date and valuable, let's say. Because what's more, you know, let's say if you have three top billers who have all of the data in their head, or you have a database of 20,000 candidates that is, you know, 60% up to date. I know which is riskier and which I think is more valuable for an investor's point of view. So that might get their attention as well.
Well, there we go. We will definitely bring this up at another point. This sounds like this should be almost like an in-person roundtable focus group. So I'll see what we can do on that one. I will leave you all there for today. Tracey, thank you so much. We will come back and respond to everything else in the comments as well. Thank you, everybody, for joining. I look forward to hopefully seeing you all back here again next Wednesday after the long weekend for a very interesting conversation with James about the strategy and keeping top of all these automations. So hopefully now we've done the marketing, we've done the data, and hopefully the final piece of the puzzle will be there as well. So have a lovely rest of the day, everybody. Thank you, Tracey, and I will speak to you all soon. Thanks.
Bye now. Bye, guys.